The chair hit my back so hard I heard my spine crack. I dropped to the floor, tasting blood, while the entire room of Marines cheered like they were watching a sport. The Commandant stood over me, veins bulging, spit flying as he screamed, "Die now!" Boots pounded the concrete. Men laughed. Someone yelled, "That's what General Hale's daughters deserve." They thought I was a nobody, a weak woman with the wrong last name, a target. I let them laugh. I let them celebrate. Because not one of them knew. The woman they just tried to kill was a 27-year Navy SEAL admiral and their new commanding officer. And in the next 3 seconds, every man cheering was about to learn how fast an admiral gets up. As I pushed myself off the ground, the taste of iron still sharp on my tongue, I knew this moment wasn't just about me. Not about the pain in my spine. Not about the Commandant's voice still echoing through the rafters. This was about something bigger. So if you're watching this, if you're hearing my voice right now, listen closely. Stories like this matter because respect is not given in rooms like these. It's torn out of clenched fists and broken egos. Because misjudgment is a weapon. And today, they used it on the wrong woman. Because brutality isn't new. It's the oldest language in the military. But every language has a native speaker. And I have spoken it for 27 years. So before we go any deeper, before I show you exactly what happened in the seconds that followed, take a breath. Understand the weight of this moment. Not because of the violence you've seen, but because of what violence reveals. Who a man truly is when he thinks no one is watching. Who a woman becomes when the world tries to break her. And what happens when a room full of arrogant soldiers attacks the most dangerous operator alive. If you're ready for that truth, then keep listening. Because the next thing that happened rewrote every story those men ever told about strength, dominance, and fear. I had walked into many bases in my life, forward operating posts carved into mountains, jungle camps where you could smell death before you saw it, steel corridors on submarines where silence was a weapon. But nothing prepared me for this place. This Marine base was different. Rotten. I could feel it before I even crossed the threshold. Discipline wasn't just slipping here. It had died quietly, without a funeral. And the strangest part? Everyone seemed proud of that. This was my father's command. General Rowan Hale. A man carved out of iron and fire, a man whose very footsteps had shaped generations of warriors. He believed discipline was the only difference between a soldier who lived long enough to write letters home and one who died nameless in the mud. But these Marines, they despised him for it. I saw it in their eyes long before the Commandant raised that chair. Saw it in the way they lounged instead of standing at attention. In the way they muttered about him like he was a tyrant instead of the man trying to keep them alive. They called him brutal, heartless, obsessed. But I knew the truth they refused to face. Softness kills faster than bullets. My father had spent years trying to drill that truth into them. But all they saw was a man demanding too much, pushing too hard, expecting excellence they weren't willing to bleed for. So they rebelled, not openly, but quietly, in small acts of defiance that add up over time. Sloppy formations, late drills, ignored protocols, mocked rules. Undisciplined men worship undisciplined leaders. And this base had found one. The Commandant had turned laziness into culture. He rewarded arrogance, praised disobedience, called sloppiness individuality, and punished anyone who still believed in standards. He made mediocrity feel like freedom. And freedom is sweet until the enemy shows up. I watched these men celebrate every shortcut he allowed, every rule he crushed, every standard he tore down. And, because I carried my father's last name, they despised me the moment I walked in. Not for anything I did, but for everything I represented. For the discipline they fled from. For the legacy they couldn't live up to. For the mirror they didn't want held up to their faces. And when I felt the Commandant's blow between my shoulder blades, when I tasted blood and concrete in the same breath. I understood something with absolute clarity. This space wasn't broken by accident. It was broken by design. And if they thought attacking a Hale would make them feel powerful, they were seconds away from learning the cost of touching one. I didn't announce myself when I arrived. That was intentional. After 27 years in special warfare, you learn that silence has a way of revealing more than words ever could. A loud entrance gets you attention. A quiet one shows you who people truly are. So I walked through the gates in a plain-duty uniform, no ribbons, no stripes, no badges. Just fabric. Just boots. Just my breath in the cool morning air. No escort. No ceremony. No salute waiting at the door. A ghost returning to a place that didn't even know it was haunted. I kept my shoulders relaxed, my pace steady, my eyes forward. Every instinct in my body screamed to profile the room, mark exits, read angles, gauge threats. But today, the threat assessment was already complete before I stepped foot inside. The danger wasn't hiding in corners. It was standing in the open. The soldiers in the hallway didn't greet me. They didn't acknowledge me. Most didn't even pretend to stand straighter as I passed. Instead, they looked at me with that slow, lingering stare men use when they believe a woman is trespassing in a space built for them. I didn't react. Didn't give them anything to measure. But they gave me something. Their eyes drifted not to my hands, not to my boots, not to my posture. To my name tag. Hale. And, just like that, the air shifted. Some sneered. Some smirked. Some scowled openly like the letters themselves offended them. My father's shadow stretched long across the space, and they had spent years trying to convince themselves that the man was the problem. And now here I was. Proof they couldn't escape the standard he represented. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know I'd seen more combat than everyone in that corridor combined. Didn't know I'd been the only one to walk out of missions that swallowed entire teams. Didn't know my name had been erased from records for 7 years because I was operating in places that technically didn't exist. But none of that mattered to them. All they saw was the last name they hated, and a woman wearing it. I saw the resentment build in their eyes like a storm. Saw the questions forming, the hostility rising, the judgment sharpening to a blade's edge. And then I stepped into the barracks. The noise dropped. Not to silence, but to that heavy, suffocating quiet that a room takes on when something unexpected walks in. 100 eyes landed on me. None kind. None curious. Just cruel. Hale. That word alone was the reason they leaned forward in their seats. The reason their jaws clenched. The reason their fists tightened. They believed I was here to spy for my father. To report their laziness. To drag his standards back into their comfortable, undisciplined world. They didn't know the truth. I wasn't here for my father. I wasn't here for them either. I was here because fate has a twisted sense of timing. And sometimes the most dangerous woman alive walks into a room full of enemies. In the quietest way possible. Unannounced. Unarmed. Unshakable. And unaware that within the next minute, one man was going to make the biggest mistake of his life. The moment I stepped fully into that barracks, the temperature of the room dropped, not physically, but socially. I've walked into ambushes that felt warmer. Women don't last long on this base. Not because they're weak, but because the men here decided that weakness is something they get to define. And in their definition, woman is the first word under liability. I could see it in their posture. The way their shoulders relaxed with disrespect. The way their feet stayed planted when they should have been standing. The way their mouths curled into half smirks that said more than words ever could. This place didn't just discourage women. It devoured them. Every female recruit who walked through these doors became a target within minutes. A hazing punchline. A training obstacle. A piece of meat thrown into a cage of starving wolves who believed cruelty was culture. They mocked their voices. Mocked their strength. Mocked their attempts to keep pace. And when the Commandant let it happen, hell encouraged it. Their hatred found roots. I heard snippets the moment I entered. Great, another skirt. General Hale sending his daughters to spy now? She'll be gone by tomorrow. She came to the wrong place. They didn't lower their voices. They didn't wait for privacy. To them, I was already dismissed. Already labeled. Already buried under the weight of assumptions they'd carry until the day someone broke them. Most of them thought women weaken the force. That the military's decline started the day the door opened for us. That discipline died because we stepped into the same mud and wore the same boots. Funny how men blame everyone except themselves for their own failures. But I didn't respond. Didn't flinch. Didn't correct them. I've learned that silence is the loudest threat in rooms filled with insecure men. It makes them twitch. Makes them bold. Makes them stupid. The new recruits, barely shaved, heavy with false confidence, watched me like a pack of dogs waiting for the weakest one to limp. They whispered to each other, eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a show. To them, I wasn't an unknown. I was predictable. They looked at my plain uniform. No braid, no ribbons, no insignia, and made their judgments. Weak. Rankless. Useless. A new female recruit. Another body taking up space. They didn't know the truth. And they didn't care. They were too busy convincing themselves they owned this place. Too busy believing their culture of mockery made them warriors. But warriors aren't forged in comfort. They're forged in fire. And as I walked deeper into that barracks, through the noise, through the sneers, through the stares, I felt the inevitable pull of gravity drawing all their arrogance toward one moment. The moment when one man would step forward, open his mouth, and seal his fate. Every toxic room produces a leader, a figure who carries the weight of every bad habit and every rotten mindset. And in this base, that rot wore a uniform and a grin. And he was walking straight toward me. I didn't have to turn around to feel him approach. Some men move with authority. Others move with ego. Commandant Briggs moved with the kind of loud, stomping arrogance that made the walls shake before he even entered a room. He announced himself without saying a word. Boots hitting concrete like hammers. Breath heavy from rage he hadn't even released yet. A silence spreading behind him as the Marines straightened. Not out of respect, but worship. Toxic leaders don't gain followers. They gather disciples. Briggs was the worst kind of commander. Loud enough to intimidate the weak. Lazy enough to appeal to the undisciplined. And cruel enough to stay in power. Men like him rise quickly in places where standards die. And this base? It had been buried long before I arrived. Briggs didn't hate my father because of personal conflict. He hated him because General Hale represented everything he wasn't. Discipline, honor, control, and a spine carved from granite. Where my father demanded excellence, Briggs rewarded shortcuts. Where my father corrected mistakes, Briggs mocked the ones who tried. Where my father built warriors, Briggs built cowards who believed they were strong. And these men adored him for it. As he walked toward me, the crowd parted with the kind of reverence most men reserve for saints. But what they worshipped wasn't holy. It was familiar weakness wearing a uniform. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough for me to smell his arrogance. Close enough for his shadow to fall over me like a stain. He looked me up and down with a slow, assessing sneer. Not evaluating threat, but measuring disrespect. Then his eyes landed on it. My name tag. Hale. His jaw twitched. His nostrils flared. Something inside him snapped clean in half. There are two types of men who see the Hale name. Those who stand straighter. And those who spit the word like poison. Briggs belonged to the second category. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, loud enough for the entire barracks to hear. A little Hale mouse crawling into my house? I didn't blink. He spoke again, this time louder, his voice booming off the metal rafters. Look at this. General Hale's spawn thinks she can just walk in here like she belongs. A ripple of laughter rolled through the room. He fed off it. He always fed off it. That old man's been shoving his rules down our throats for years, Briggs growled. And now he sends one of his daughters to check if we're behaving? He was posturing, trying to awaken the anger he'd bred in them, trying to remind them who controlled this place. I stayed still, and my silence enraged him. Briggs hated women because he couldn't control them, hated discipline because he couldn't live up to it, hated Hale because it reminded him of everything he'd never be. And in me, he saw all three. He stepped even closer, breath hot with fury. You picked the wrong base, girl, he snarled. You're not welcome here. Not as a recruit. Not as a spy. Not as anything. Around us, the Marines smirked, emboldened by his voice. Some folded their arms. Some leaned forward like they were watching a fight about to start. Briggs cracked his neck, squared his shoulders, and spoke with a poisonous smile. Let me show you what we do to weak Hales in my command. I met his eyes, and I saw it clearly, the fatal mistake forming in his mind. He thought I came here alone. Thought I came here unranked. Thought I came here unprepared. Thought I came here as General Hale's daughter. He had no idea. I walked in as his superior officer, and the highest-ranking warrior on the entire base. But he was about to learn. The hard way. His shadow swallowed the space around me as he closed the last few steps, the room tightening behind him like a noose. Everything about Commandant Briggs was loud, his boots, his breathing, his rage, but the closer he got to me, the quieter the world around us became. That's how you know a predator believes he's already won. He starts mistaking silence for surrender. He planted himself in front of me, so close I could feel the heat of his anger on my skin. His voice dropped into a snarl, the kind meant to intimidate the weak, the unsure, the ones who fold under male authority. Look at you, he hissed. The general's spoiled brat. Born into rank. Dragged in here because Daddy can't stand that we don't worship him. I didn't respond. Not because I was afraid, but because silence is a blade, sharper than any knife, more dangerous than any threat. I let him feel it slice through his ego. It worked. His lip curled, rage tightening his muscles like a man lifting a weapon. You're not welcome here, he snapped. Not on my base. Not in my barracks. Not in my command. His chest heaved. The room watched. The men behind him absorbed every word like gospel. You here to spy for Daddy? He barked. Going to run back and tell him we don't bow to his perfect soldier garbage? Still, I didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't give him 1 inch of emotional ground. My calm was gasoline. His anger was the match. He stepped even closer, shoulders broad, blocking out the overhead lights. Answer me, he growled. I didn't. He couldn't stand it. He shoved me hard. The impact would have knocked any recruit off their feet. But I didn't move an inch. My boots remained planted. My spine stayed straight. I watched confusion flash across his face. Just for a breath. But it was enough. He doubled down, shoving me again, harder this time, his palms slamming into my shoulders, his weight behind it. Still nothing. No stagger. No recoil. No fear. Only stillness. Stillness scares weak men more than violence ever will. The murmurs began behind him. Small at first, then stronger. What the hell? She didn't even budge. Did she brace for that? Briggs heard it. He needed to reclaim the moment. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something bigger, something louder, something that would drown out the doubt creeping into his men. Then he saw it. The steel chair. And in his mind, that was the answer. He grabbed it with a furious yank, metal scraping against concrete, the screeching sound cutting through the barracks like a warning siren. But the warning wasn't for me. It was for him. Because in the second he wrapped his fingers around that chair, Briggs crossed a line he could never uncross. The kind of line careers end over. The kind of line men regret for the rest of their lives. He swung it up, lifting it over his shoulder like he was about to execute a battlefield enemy. His voice ripped through the room, feral and unhinged. You die now. The men roared. Boots stomped. Fists hit tables. They wanted blood. They wanted to see a Hale break. And they were seconds away from realizing they had just attacked the only Hale the world fears. An admiral. A ghost. A weapon walking in human skin. And I was about to rise. The moment the words left his mouth, the chair came down. Metal met bone with a crack so sharp it vibrated through my ribs. Pain shot down my spine like a lightning bolt, hot and blinding. My breath tore out of me, and my knees buckled before I could catch myself. I hit the concrete hard, palms burning, teeth rattling, but the room didn't gasp. They cheered. The entire barracks exploded in celebration, as if the Commandant had just scored a victory in some twisted game. Boots stomped on the floor. Tables shook from fists. Voices ripped through the air like gunfire. Take her down. That's what a Hale woman gets. Should have stayed home, princess. Where's your daddy now? Their laughter wasn't casual, it was hungry. A blood-sport kind of thrill. The kind of excitement men get when they think they've found something weaker than themselves. To them, I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a veteran. I wasn't a threat. I was a joke. A target. A piece of flesh in their arena. Rankless. Worthless. Defenseless. A woman they had decided did not belong in their world. And hearing my father's name in their jeers was no accident. They believed hitting me was hitting him. They believed knocking me down was knocking down everything he stood for. I stayed on the ground for a breath, letting the pain settle into my bones, letting their voices soak into the air around me. It wasn't weakness. It was calculation. Because in that roar of cruelty, I heard their blind spots, their arrogance, their certainty that the story was already finished. No one in that room imagined I'd stand again. No one imagined the woman lying on the concrete had spent 27 years walking through firefights that would kill them in seconds. No one imagined that the plain uniform hiding my identity wasn't a sign of low rank, but the camouflage of someone who operated too far in the shadows to wear anything at all. Briggs stood above me, chest heaving, sweat shining on his forehead, convinced he had just ended something. He couldn't imagine that he had just started it. Little did they know. The most dangerous part wasn't the hit I took. It was the moment I put my hand on the floor and began to rise. For a moment, I stayed on the concrete, palms pressed to the cold floor, breath thin, my muscles tightening around the impact that still burned across my spine. Around me, the cheers rolled on, loud and brutal. They thought it was over. They thought the hit had done what they needed it to. Humiliate the daughter of the man they hated. They didn't understand what they were looking at. Pain doesn't break you when you've lived in it for decades. It sharpens you. So I planted my boot against the floor and pushed upward slowly, deliberately, without a single tremor of weakness. The laughter didn't stop immediately. But the room sensed something. You could feel it. A shift, subtle at first, like the drop in pressure before a storm detonates. By the time I straightened my spine, the noise had died to a nervous murmur. I didn't show the pain. Didn't show the anger. Didn't show anything at all. No emotion. No flinch. No breath deeper than necessary. Just stillness. And when I lifted my head, my eyes found Briggs. His smirk faltered. He took a half step back. Subtle, instinctive, the kind of movement a man makes when his body recognizes danger before his ego catches up. In that moment, I saw the truth flicker across his face. He realized the woman he hit wasn't reacting like any victim he'd ever seen. He realized something was wrong. And it was already too late. I didn't warn him. Warnings are for those who deserve second chances. I moved. 2 seconds. That's all it took. My hand shot forward, clamping onto his wrist with a precision born from years of breaking men twice his size. His bones shifted under my grip, and his eyes widened before he could form a single word. I twisted. A clean, sharp rotation that stripped the strength from his arm before his brain processed the pain. His shoulder buckled with a deep, wet pop. The kind of sound that drains color from faces. He gasped, stumbling forward. And that was when I struck the pressure point under his ribcage. A quick jab that shut down his ability to breathe. His knees buckling as air fled his lungs in a strangled choke. He crashed to the floor like a tower collapsing. 3 seconds. That's all it took to erase the bravado from his voice and the arrogance from his face. Silence swallowed the room whole. 100 Marines stood frozen, mouths open, breath trapped between disbelief and terror. You could hear a pin drop. Men who had laughed a heartbeat ago now stood as still as statues, watching the Commandant writhe on the floor. His wrist twisted, his shoulder dislocated, his breath trapped behind fear. And in the center of their silence, I stood exactly where he had tried to break me. Tall, calm, unshaken. A ghost they tried to kill. Now risen. And watching them with the eyes of someone who had survived far worse than any man in that room. The Commandant was still on the floor, clutching his shoulder, gasping like a drowning man trying to understand how the water got above his head. Around him, the barracks had turned into a graveyard of frozen faces. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum quieter, afraid to disrupt the moment. I stood in front of them, breathing steady, posture controlled, mind clear. And for the first time since I walked into that building, I allowed myself to make a single deliberate gesture. I reached up to my collar. The room tensed as if every spine locked at the same time. My fingers found the flap hiding what no one here had bothered to look for. I pulled it aside slowly, giving the moment the weight it deserved. A ripple of shock moved through the air. There it was. The patch. Clean. Precise. Unmistakable. Admiral. United States Navy. 27 years. Special Warfare Command. I didn't have to say anything. The silence said enough. But the silence wasn't for me. It was for them. The men who had cheered when I hit the floor. The cowards who had smirked when their commandant raised a weapon. The ones who had mocked my name as if it didn't carry blood, sacrifice, and shadow missions they couldn't even pronounce. The gasp moved through the room like a shockwave. Some covered their mouths. Some took a step back. Some looked like they had just witnessed their careers evaporate in front of them. Briggs stared up at me, eyes wide, pupils blown wide with fear. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he'd seen a ghost. In a way, he had. A woman declared dead on paper. Buried in classified files. Sent into missions none of them could survive. Now standing over him. Unmoved, unharmed, unbroken. I let the moment breathe. Let them drown in it. Then I spoke. My voice didn't rise. Didn't shake. Didn't need volume to command obedience. It came out low, steady, and absolute. I outrank every man in this room. A tremor moved through them. One of realization. One of fear. One of shame. Because in that single sentence, every lie they'd told themselves collapsed. I wasn't a recruit. I wasn't a spy. I wasn't a weak woman walking into the wrong room. I was the highest-ranking warrior on the entire base. A 27-year SEAL admiral. Their superior. Their nightmare. And the daughter of the man they'd mocked so freely. Briggs tried to speak. Nothing came out but a choked breath. He understood. They all understood. And there was no undoing what they had done. The moment the word Admiral left my lips, Briggs' entire face changed. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't gradual. It was a full, catastrophic unraveling of a man who finally understood the scale of the mistake he had made. His mouth opened, then closed. His breath stuttered in his throat. His eyes darted over my patch. Once, twice, a third time. As if staring long enough would make it disappear. It didn't. Slowly, the truth crushed him. He looked at his wrist twisted in my lock. He looked at his shoulder hanging at the wrong angle. He looked at the Marines staring at him, the ones who had once cheered him, worshipped him, hid behind his arrogance. And then, he looked at me. A 27-year SEAL admiral. A ghost he couldn't kill. A Hale he couldn't break. My presence alone dismantled everything he had built on this base. The laziness, the cruelty, the culture of fear disguised as leadership. He realized there was no apology strong enough. No excuse clever enough. No lie sharp enough to cut through the truth standing above him. His breathing hitched. His face cracked. Then it happened. He dropped. Both knees slammed into the concrete with a hollow, pathetic thud. His hands trembled as he reached toward me, not in defiance, but in surrender. Tears spilled down his face, fast and uncontrollable. Not grief. Not guilt. Pure, collapsing terror. He opened his mouth, but the first sound wasn't words. It was a choked sob. Then, with every ounce of his broken pride leaking onto the floor, he screamed, "I am destroyed." The words echoed across the barracks, bouncing off metal and bone. Men who once laughed at me now flinched like they'd been struck. At the door, the military police burst in. Responding to the alarm I'd triggered with a silent tap on my wristband during the confrontation. 2 of them froze when they saw my rank. Then 3 more arrived, forming a perimeter in seconds. "Admiral Hale, ma'am, are you injured?" one asked. "No," I said. "But he is done." Briggs didn't resist. Couldn't. His body was too wrecked, his spirit too shattered. The MPs grabbed him under the arms. He wailed like a man watching his own burial. "I didn't know, I didn't, please." His voice dissolved into sobs as they dragged him across the floor, his knees scraping against the concrete he once strutted across like a king. They hauled him through the doorway and out of sight. And then something extraordinary happened. Every Marine in that barracks snapped to attention. Boots together. Chests up. Faces pale. Hands shaking. Not because they respected me. Not yet. Because in 1 minute, they had watched their world collapse. And realized the one standing at the center of the wreckage was the woman they had tried to break. I looked at them row after row of silent, trembling soldiers. And they looked back like they were staring at judgment itself. And this time, there was no laughter left in the room. The barracks was silent. Not the kind of silence that follows shock, but the kind that comes before judgment, before reckoning, before truth finally lands where it should have been all along. 100 Marines stood frozen in formation, eyes forward, shoulders locked, fear thick enough to taste in the air. I stepped into the center of the room. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just present fully, undeniably, and in the authority they had tried to crush minutes earlier. Their gazes followed me without moving their heads. The way prey track a predator when instinct demands stillness. When I reached the middle, I turned slowly, facing them all. "You think my father failed you?" The words were quiet, but they struck harder than any command I'd ever given. Several jaws tightened. Some throats bobbed. Not one man dared to breathe too loudly. "You think his discipline was cruelty," I continued. "You think his standards were unreasonable. You think you are victims of a man who demanded too much." I let the weight of that settle. Then I cut deeper. "But the truth is simple." I looked across the room. At the men who laughed when I hit the floor. The ones who chanted for my death. The ones who thought brutality made them powerful. "You didn't fail because he was hard," I said. "You failed because you were soft." A ripple of shame moved through them. Visible, undeniable. "You failed him," I said, my voice steady. "And you failed yourselves." I gave them no room to hide behind excuses. No more shortcuts. No more mockery. No more chaos disguised as leadership. I paused for a single breath. Because starting today, I am taking command of this base. A few faces twitched in disbelief. But no one spoke. No one dared. I stepped closer, letting them feel the force behind my words. "And training begins now." The room stiffened, as if bracing for impact. But the impact wasn't coming from me. It was coming from everything I represented. The discipline they abandoned. The standard they mocked. The legacy they spat on. and the Admiral they tried to kill. I turned toward the exit, then stopped in the doorway. I looked back at them. Men who had once believed they were untouchable, now standing in front of me like raw recruits waiting for their first order. "Stand up," I said quietly. Every spine straightened at once. "Stand up," I repeated, "because your Admiral has returned." The words didn't boom. They didn't need to. They carried a truth none of them would ever forget. And before I walked out, I left them with the promise of what was coming next. This base will be undefeated. Not because of fear. I let the final line cut through the silence. But because of discipline. Fade. The beginning of a new command. And the end of the old world they thought they ruled.